Hello, everyone, and welcome to my review of the latest adaptation of Jane Austen's romantic comedy, Emma. Now, Emma is actually my favorite Jane Austen novel, and I've seen pretty much every adaptation of it. Although I think my two favorites are the Gwyneth Paltrow one and the the BBC version starring Romala Sadiz. I hope I'm saying that right. I always mispronounce her name, but I love the characters in that. I love the interplay and the chemistry. Those two just really work for me. Although the Kate Beckinsale one is really good as well. If you haven't seen it, that's another BBC production. And the 1972 version done by the BBC is charming as well. It's probably closer to the novel than the other ones, but and you can see it on YouTube. And so I recommend that as well. Okay, so for those of you who may not know, um, this version of Emma stars Anya Taylor-Joy as the title character and Johnny Flynn as the reserved gentleman's gentleman, Mr. Knightley. All right, and the plot of Emma, in case you haven't read the book or seen any of the adaptations, and maybe you're just here because you're curious about the trailer that you saw, is about a young woman who's rich, handsome, and clever. She is the queen bee of her small village of Highbury, and everyone adores her, and they think that she cannot do any wrong. And she's grown up with very little to vex her. So that changes when her governess and her best friend, Miss Taylor, marries Mr. Weston. So now Emma's lonely, and so because she's lonely, she's looking for a friend. And that friend happens to be a parlor boiler named Harriet. All right. And so her dedication to improving Harriet ends up showcasing sort of the worst of her vanity, and it leads to kind of disastrous results, right? So Emma is not your typical heroine. And when I say that she's not your typical heroine, she's not altogether like sugar and spice and everything nice. She is spoiled. She's a self-centered brat. She believes that she's more clever than she is. And she makes a point of believing that she can make things happen, particularly these matches. Like, she's this great matchmaker. All right. And people sort of just buy into it. Like, there's even a part where her father says, I wish you wouldn't say things because everything that you say comes to pass. Right. So that gives you an idea of how much she's just really, really just kind of like adored. The only person who would deign to criticize her is her brother in law, Mr. Knightley. And they have a playful banner that sort of masks this sexual attraction that they have that neither one of them is willing to admit. All right. Now, the thing that makes Emma interesting is that she shouldn't be likable, but she is. And a lot of that has to do, in my opinion, sort of like when you read the novel, you kind of are in her head and you kind of see that she's coming from a good place. But also, the actresses that have played her have like really given her sort of like a heart, right? And also the actors and actresses that have played the other characters have really done a great job of bringing all these ridiculously eccentric characters of Highbury to life. All right. So that, however, is really not the case with this Emma. Like, in my opinion, this Emma is missing a lot of heart. I mean, it's full of bright colors and breathtaking landscapes and beautiful fixtures and houses. But, like, it's almost like the people are there for, like, decorations. They're there to showcase the costume and the scenery. They're almost like secondary. What is going on? And what struck me when I was watching this movie, it was almost like I was watching a satire of Emma instead of an adaptation of Emma itself. And what I mean about that is, like, much of the scenes and the dialogue that makes Emma like so great in the books and the other movies were either truncated or it's just missing like altogether. All right. You know, I'm not super surprised by this because the director, Autumn Wilde, um, she says that her favorite adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma is Clueless. Now, while I adore Clueless, I think it's a really great movie. Um, that kind of tone doesn't necessarily fit sort of in the Regency era. So I think that's one of the reasons why the movie is kind of a little bit off. All right. Now, there's also, a difference between the vapid world of, Clueless, and Cher Horowitz and the genteel world of Highbury that sort of masks this economic disparity that hangs almost every character sort of like a dark cloud. Like, Emma is about romance, but it's also about money and finances and what happens when you have it or you lack it. Um, Gone in this is, Frank Churchill's plight about being sort of beholden to his rich aunt and uncle. Gone is Jane's fear of, being forced into governorship, which was really being a governess, right? Which is really the only option for a woman in her class who is not married but has no money. Right. Barely touched upon is Miss and Mrs. Bates' plight and the fact that literally their existence is dependent on the kindness of Highbury society. All right. And then also gone is the fact that the real threat to Harriet is she has to make a good match. She is illegitimate. She has no money. All right, and the very danger is that Emma could be ruining her chance at a happy and respectable life. All right, and that's sort of kind of glossed over completely. All right, and also Emma's real snobbery never really comes out. She has a thing against the nouveau rich Coles because they're tradesmen. And, she looks down on Harriet's love, Mr. Martin, because he's a farmer. All right. And so what we get instead of that when we're looking at class is we get a whole bunch of just nameless, faceless servants that are just everywhere. And in my opinion, just incredibly distracting. And I guess they're supposed to represent sort of the other side of the coin, the masses, that make the life possible for the rich, and they're supposed to sort of point out these social inequities, but you don't need that. Like you don't need that when you already clearly have characters within the story that talk about the issues of money and class and also gender bias. Because if you notice, like the women in the novel, Miss Bates, Jane, Harriet, their fortunes depend on whether or not they were able to or were not able to marry well, right? And that's, something that Jane Austen, of course, was preoccupied with as a woman of her time. Right? Also gone is the sexual tension between Emma and Mr. Knightley. I didn't really feel it with these particular actors and actresses, and I don't know if it's their fault or if it's the fact that a lot of the scenes and the dialogue that really kind of let you know who they are to each other is just missing and it's just not there. And that should be the core of the movie. I mean, the irony is that Emma's going around trying to matchmake and trying to fix everybody else's life, but she can't see the love that's right underneath her nose, right? That's one of the ironies of the movie, all right? So instead of character development, we get over the top gestures, we get extreme looks, we get shallow interactions, all right? Jane and Frank Churchill, quite frankly, they seem to just be in the movie simply because their story is so integral to the book, all right? And so they have to be in it, okay? But their very important story and sort of there is barely sort of a thread in this. Also, Mr. and Mrs. Bates, Elton, Mrs. Elton, Isabella, her husband, the younger Mr. Knightley. They're little more than just comic relief. But despite that, there seems to be very little effort to make the characters fully realized. Another thing is, and this is the thing that really just upset me, all right, is that they butcher like one of the best scenes like in the novel. I mean, it's one of the most anticipated moments, and it's played for laughs and comic relief. And I don't understand like why they did that. All right. And then there's the soundtrack, completely and totally inappropriate and overpowering. Um, I'm not exactly sure why that decision was made for that. It should be sort of more subtle, more in the background, but it really is. It's distracting. It's distracting. A lot of the things in this movie is distracting from the plot and from the characters, which is really sad because that is what makes Emma great. So after saying all this, you might think, hey, she really hated this movie. Like, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I was just really disappointed by it because, I wanted more. And of course, again, some of the scenes that I really, really love to look forward to seeing in Emma, they just weren't there. So, my advice to you, to be, if you are a fan of Emma, go see the movie. Go see the movie, but temper your expectations, right? So that's my review of Emma. If you like this review, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.